Hi, how's it going? This is Resident of Collinwood, and I'm here to continue my read-along review for The Dark Shadows Daybook, written by Patrick McCray. I am starting here. See the picture? Sorry. 1967. Somebody order a vampire? A small-time crook unleashes a sleeping vampire, Barnabas Collins. Moving onto the family estate, Barnabas seeks the reincarnation of his lost love, Josette, who appears to be Maggie Evans, working at the local diner. Although Maggie escapes Barnabas, she comes under the care of psychologist Dr. Julia Hoffman. Dr. Hoffman's unrequited love for Barnabas may equal what Barnabas feels for Josette. Episode 211. No other character on television is quite as iconic in the same way as Barnabas Collins. Human in his frailty, mythic in the fate he will chart at the very least. He was a figure designed to save a network television show and potentially the careers of everyone involved. April 14th, 1967 was the most important day in a lot of lives, most specifically the life of Dan Curtis. Curtis had already introduced the reality of the character prior with the image of the hand thrusting up from the chained coffin. When I first saw that shot, it felt like it had always been in my memory, even though I'd never seen it before. It's simple, fierce, savage, and sudden. How do you top that? Because we all have to see all of him at some point. Director John Sidgwick's approach sustains the iconic renaissance of Willie's strangulation and adds a forbidding sense of structure. Barnabas is about dysautonomy. We've seen the beast, but what else is Barnabas? What makes us want to solve him, take his hand as a friend, sharing his secret? His introduction happens in just 3 images. First, there is a knock at the door of Collinwood. When Mrs. Johnson answers, she encounters a man whose face we do not initially see, introducing himself as a visiting cousin from England. He's seeking the woman of the house. Mrs. Johnson, startled by something about him, shows the man in. They exchange pleasantries, and as she leaves, we finally see him next to the 1795 portrait of Barnabas Collins. The man is a twin for the painting subject, and his name, also Barnabas Collins. 2 clear and subtle, clever images with a bridge. His introduction comes from his own perspective rather than Mrs. Johnson's. It's an exterior shot of the entrance looking in. At first, we see someone, him, through the eyes of Mrs. Johnson, the camera hanging over his shoulder, minimizing her. Why is she so transfixed? We follow her gaze up to the towering figure, following the slope of his collar. We come back to Mrs. Johnson, specifically her throat. After that, we circle back up to her gaze, even more worried. For what reason? Then he enters with purpose. And we next see him again from the back, divesting himself of his cane and hat, getting a glimpse of his strangely antique clock. His voice is rich, with an unequally tentative sense of authority. We still don't see his face, just bits of his profile. These moments tease us, and yet they put us in the position of a confidant of the vampires. The composition mirrors what we see outside. Within, Mrs. Johnson is minimized and turned in the figure shows him limbing, ready to strike again. We begin with her following her gaze from left to right. The mystery of what bedevils her is what bedevils us as well. The man looms in the right, blocking the exit. Instead of following a sloping collar, we follow its larger expanding offspring in the cape, which takes us circling to the left. Again, we stop on the poor, minuscule shield of his hat, and then look like a wolf pulling her away, his feral-looking cane, situated so close to the predator, with his gaze elsewhere. We have a strange safety. We don't see him from the eyes of his prey. Instead, we are quietly unacknowledged friend. Finally, as Mrs. Johnson goes to summon Elizabeth, the figure turns to face the portrait, rotating upstage to let us see him from profile to profile. We are alone with him. The chiseled face comes into focus from a side. It is alien. It is familiar. We think we know why. But when we see why, there are only face to face for a moment before the camera takes us away from him, to be uncomfortable close to the painting from 1795. Cold and hefty and haggard and sad. He then steps even closer to it. He spins outward and gives his inevitable name. We see the two men, one painted, one real, in mutual relief. The painted Barnabas is a prisoner in a former sided frame on the wall, disapproving and distant. The first thing our eyes rest on is the painting, gazing at the man. No, the more we look, the more the painting is gazing at us, as we've been caught looking. It's natural to avert our eyes from this. And by comparison, the living Barnabas is practically benevolent. The portrait's impossible doppelganger is standing before it in 3 dimensions. Excuse me, sorry. On our 2D screen, liberated, he smiles. And there is something optimistic in it. He's gazing upward to the landing. Yes, but also to the future. Looking left, he's anticipating the next image rather than searching for one that has passed. subtle. Our eyes scan down the torso of the man in the portrait where his medal is a subtle reminder that, despite the man's strange warmth, he's a soldier, as well perhaps a gentleman. Certainly a force that does not belong, and has never been away. A force destined to change history. If the house is timeless, then so is he. Episode 222. With nothing to lose but his inhibitions, Barnabas explores the wild world of male modeling to win Maggie's heart. Barnabas, Jonathan Frick. Barnabas, eager to have Maggie in his home, asked Sam Evans to paint his portrait, probably also so he knows what he looks like. Sam agrees, and the two men start working late at night. Barnabas awakens to find himself in a new world of gods and coincidences. Although I suspect he wishes that Maggie's father were a contractor, given the state of the old house wallpaper. The coincidence leads to one of Dark Shadow's classic moments, and raises questions about practicalities as well. Critics of the show would be hard-pressed to cite this with the usual cavils of chins and champ. It's spare and eloquent, with Jonathan Frick delivering a chemistry. I don't know, it was my place. So. Or did I jump? Give me a second. Sorry, delivering a performance that's somewhere between Little Boy, lost, and utterly sinister. His chemistry extends to the entire cast, and the result is an unusual tight episode. It has an ending we all see coming, but is still relevant with mystery and implication. Sam insists on finishing a final detail on Barnabas' portrait as the sun begins to rise. As he finishes, Barnabas has escaped. Impossible. That's the moment we enjoy it 3 ways. Even a new viewer is Barnabas' secret confidant, knowing what Collinsport doesn't. But we don't know everything, including what he's up to, or how far this will go. And at the same time, we're seeing Sam's model vanish from his point of view, enjoying the eerie mystery, wondering if either artist or model will return the next night. As schemes go, this whole painting business is yet another moment that makes Dark Shadows the most poker-faced sitcom on TV. Like a love-struck 14-year-old, Barnabas comes up with every possible scheme to just accidentally keep running into Maggie, as if he's getting advice from Ralph Mouth and Putsy. This is right on the heels of the moment where he just so happens to leave his cane at the diner. So he has another excuse to see Maggie. In this case, he schemes to have Maggie's dad paint his portrait under ludicrous circumstances so that he can be in her company. You call it creepy. I call it adorable. It's beyond a meet cute. It's Barnabas' wacky concession that it's a new world. What's become of the fine art of courtship? He's exhausted himself looking for a daring cotillion or decent public hanging. And with that cordial, quadricle, gone, he has no choice but to resort to schemes. I think this impulse is the only reason. Willie puts up with him. Well, that is the threat of constant beatings. The comical highlight of the episode may be when Barnabas and Sam are awkwardly negotiating on a price. And Barnabas offers to pony up $1,000 that's worth north of $6,000 and 220 money. But when was the last time Barnabas commissioned a portrait of himself? The last thing he paid an artist was probably 3 casks of rum and the promise to keep Ben Stokes off the lawn. Come to think of it, Sam probably would have gone for that too. And never mind that he's never heard of Ben Stokes. Barnabas is not exactly in his element here. Locked in a coffin since the Washington administration, resorting to feeding off Willie, living a renovation nightmare, can't find a good job at Brewster's. And then there's your ex-fiance. I mean, right there. So how cool can he be? If he tried to play it smooth, he'd wind up looking like Sinatra in the Love Beads when he did his thing with the fifth dimension. And no one wants that, except for me. In the best scene of the episode, the irony train rolls through the Collinwood foyer at full blast. Maggie comes by to report to Vicky that Barnabas might as well be converting the old house into an arts colony. Expect an impassioned treatise and demonstration of naturism. Inevitably to follow the 5th round of claret cups before they can call Sheriff Patterson to join in. Vicky introduces Maggie to the portrait, and Maggie is the one person who doesn't bother with the noting Barnabas's resemblance to himself. Probably because she's seen the last few episodes. Instead, she notes the kind eyes, and both women admit that it's a relief to finally have someone pleasant around Collinwood. Liz, Roger, are you listening? I'm not here to tell Mrs. Johnson that she'd get bigger tips if she'd smile more. Although I have no doubt Burke said that once or twice after his 5th transferry and tang. But, it might make breakfast a tad less funeral. They can sense it in Barnabas. Audiences are supposed to think that the alleged kindness is camouflage for the beast. In truth, Barnabas' genuine spirit is so great that it eclipses even Angelique's curse. That's clear once you know the full story of Barnabas. Dark Shadows only seems to be built on surprise. Watched again and again, the show reveals itself as layered with ironies that comment on each other with greater wit, heart, and clarity with each viewing. After touring the show, the act of revisiting it reveals a program that seems different than it was at first, and quite a change from what it became. Quiet, forced, effective, efficient toward its well-drawn characters. Affectionate, sorry. It is exactly the tone we need to root us in. I mean it. The reality of these people, this moody tone, poem in black and white, and creamy and gray, is a real world from which we depart. Knowing that it's there, it's what allows us to stay invested into the wildest of futures, past and parallels. Episode 236. When Barnabas has a chance to deprogram Josette from thinking herself to be a 20th century diner waitress, will he be thwarted by Joe's plan to keep her in rags? Maggie, Catherine Lee Scott. Showing amazing and inevitable power, Barnabas kidnaps Maggie from her hospital room. After she is on the brink of death, Joe, Sam, and Burke investigate at the old house, but Maggie stays hidden afterwards. Barnabas begins his hypnotic conversation of Maggie to Josette. This is why we love Dark Shadows. This is also an exquisite example of a note that no one could sustain. Its poignant black gem of fear. Not of the would-be victim, fear of injury. No, it's the would-be villain's fear of loss. The question is, did this change the moral compass of horror forever? In its structure, it does the job of both horror and romance, which is to slide us out of the real world and into a realm of new rules. But no rule book, from hospital to cemetery to the old house, drawing room to a spiritual honesty in Josette's bedroom, we progress from a medical bed of science and truth to a sumptuous memory palace of a bedchamber, where reality can be whatever we want it. We want more than anything. Without hearing any distant from reality to break the spell. Why does Dark Shadows work? This is why. It reorients the horror audiences to open value what they only secretly admired. The quest of monsters to become gods, retaining their resplendent anti-humanity, while enjoying the rich fruits of emotional fulfillment. We don't root for Maggie to escape as much as we do that we hope that Barnabas succeeds. Maggie's life is far blander than even our own. We would not be flattered if suddenly treated as honored royalty by someone with the keys to Tiffany's. It's high time Maggie hung up the apron and donned the finery of most elegant age. Why not be adored? What keeps Barnabas from being read as a kidnapped stalker, or simply being a being stalker? There's a lot of those things. And there's And those things are what, there's a lot. And these things are what cement the uniqueness of the show and explain its success. By introducing Laura and Barnabas and the ghost of Josette, the show establishes that morality in Collinsport is not just the one-way 75-year trip. It's completely possible for something in the present to not only look like a thing from the past, but to be that thing from the past. Every time Barnabas looks at himself in this sketch based on the mirror, he sees this simple truth. So could Maggie, by some form of Josette giving her exact resemblance to the ghost. I would say yes, the show backs me up on this. Once you've seen the 1795 flashback, you're robbing yourself if you choose to ignore it when viewing these early episodes. It may not have been part of the filmed mythos up to that point, but it will be. And to subsequently avoid it is like chipping the chocolate off of Raisinets. Man, you don't chip chocolate off Raisinets. What's wrong? I like Raisinets. And Barnabas may be right. The other reasons, whether or not we know about the persistent Collins' physical DNA, or parallel time, or the nearly half-dozen methods the show establishes for time travel, and once we have the example of Jeff Clark, we know that the most amazing method of interpretation is to simply love hard enough in the right way. And it is poetically correct. Much has been said about Jonathan Frid's performance. The courtliness, the lack of open airs, the performer's own fear that bled into the scenes, let us match or exceed those claims with praise for his professionalism. The supreme mandate for the actor is to be truthful, moment to moment. Part of that art forbids anticipation, endings, and telegraphing messages. Villains and heroes only exist as such through the eyes of the audience. The villain always has landable goals to the villain. Barnabas is on a search and rescue to take someone from reality dishwater and reveal a princess, and not as a practical joke. That's what Frid is playing, with sincere, unwavering diligence. He just accompanies that with a ruthlessness matching the stakes of his pursuit. Barnabas, sorry. Barnabas comes from an era when people saw nothing unusual. When people saw nothing unusual in the practice of burning cats in genie sacks for amusement. Putting Maggie in a genie sack as a dress, that's nothing. As old world Barnabas announces his plan to Maggie, we see Joe's bewilderment, Sam's depression, and Burke's hard-headedness as pallid truffles of New World narcissism. and he serves her something positive rather than more of the same, sparing her the hardy sides of pregnancy-based body dysmorphia, crowned with unhealthy dollops or irreversible aging. This is a decently noir romance before Hot Topic and Torrid brought those concepts into elegant respectability. Dan Curtis and Ron Sprout went to the heart of what their key demographic wanted. And they did so to 10 to 40 years before Josh Whedon, Anne Rice, Stephanie Myers, and other people whose names I'm glad I forgot. It's not enough to be desired. You must be desired by the antithesis of the logic yokel who takes you for granted. If Barnabas were any more antithetical to the Charlotte's swilling husbands of 1967, middle America, he'd be a woman. And in his insight, he becomes awfully close, which may be the ultimate secret. Those first wave housewives fans wanted a man, for once, to treat them with the affection regarding they would have lavish on their desired Barnabas dots. But he does so in ways that provide him with no immediate sensory gratification. He is giving her what she intensively values rather than imposing what he values on her. Millions have longed for that over the centuries. One vampire listened. Episode 248. When Barnabas woes Maggie with a tour of Collinsport, cozier hideaways will Willie provide a rude awakening? Maggie Evans, Catherine Lee Scott. Barnabas punishes Maggie with an overday stay in a coffin. When she returns to the old house, her true personality seems to be permanently reemerge. We've been teased for long enough. Maggie Evans remembers she's Maggie Evans, but how are we supposed to feel? If the first viewers of the show had rooted for her escape, the character Barnabas would have had no future. If those familiar with the show say they cheer her on, they aren't that familiar with the story at all. This is the crux of the show's most moral challenging storyline. But it's not morality challenging for the characters. Their compass is clear. The challenge is for the viewer: do you side with the once and future hero, knowing that he's motivated by the depression of love, even if he pursues it with total inhumanity? Or do you side with the brave, tortured woman who will be free in only a few episodes? It's an ugly choice. If I were you, I wouldn't even dignify the question. The show is relentless in confronting us with it anyway, even if we advocate with neither or both, or are you crazy? It's borrowing a page from Vertigo. And in that too, we tactically approve of extreme behavior by a man towards a woman, because we know there is a larger purpose. The difference is that Judy is not only responsible for Scotty's pain, but through complicity the murder of Madeline, and Jimmy Stewart is not an undead herbivore. Sorry. In that movie anyway. With Barnabas, it's more complicated. Maybe both men are driven by love. Both men improve class status with extreme prejudice. Both men intuitive know that the true object of their affections lurk within. You realize these are dark Cinderellas, right? There are different and theoretically forbidden dimensions this entire topic for both men and women. Yeah, it's clear why it's abhorrent. Now, let's talk about why it's appealing anyway. Not ethical, but strangely appealing for women. Let's talk about the appeal of what's not happening. There's no rape. And I can't overemphasize the power of that. Despite everything going on, sexual violation isn't one of them. In fact, there's not even the hint this is a driven and consistent and personal desire that involves who? Maggie / Josette. Truly is rather than subaritric functions she can serve. Sex is fungible? Josette is not. With that off the table, the idea of this crime is one of the most flattering in the arena of the total reprehensive. An all-powerful uber patriarch comes to life with only one focus: to love. And unlike Laura Collins, there is no sacrifice involved. Yes, okay, Maggie will become one of the living dead, but in a very attractive, powerful, immortal way. And, well, you gotta die sometime. The prime demographic here, at this point in the run, is women home at 4 in the afternoon every weekday. I don't need a Betty Friedan on my shoulder to both delegate it and tell me that there's a good chance this viewer might feel marginalized and unfulfilled as much as Maggie screams for pop, pop, pop. She kind of has to. The story would never be over if she didn't. No one wants their identity replaced, but from the objective view of the audience, there are worse trades. Given Byronic opinion of her host, Josette sounds pretty great, and Maggie is otherwise destined for exactly the same fate of many viewers, to be Beauregarded housewives of a working-class barfly who comes home every night stinking of dead shellfish and coals. They went to bed with Joe Haskell and woke up with Curly Joe Derrida. Obituaries and funerals. Devlin, Clarence Burke, 37, whereabouts unknown, Collinsport native, and investments magnate Mr. Clarence Burke Devlin, is presumed dead along with all other passengers and crew after the crash of UWA Flight 502 near Belém, Brazil, late yesterday. The exact cause of the crash is unknown at this time. However, sources revealed that one of the wings showed unusual damage that experts believe occurred prior to the crash. When asked about the nature of the damage, airline officials declined to comment. except to reassure stockholders that no matter how it might appear, the stratus are not claw marks, and there was no creature on the wing of the plane. That's funny. Yeah. Wait a second. Wait a second. Yeah. If you don't get it, it's a reference to Twilight Zone. There's something on the wing of the plane. That'll work. Oh my God, that was beautiful. That was beautiful. Oh God, I'm sorry. Born January 11th, 1930, to lobster pot hygienist Mr. and Mrs. Sherman Devlin. I'm sorry if I keep laughing. Mr. Burke Devlin grew to manhood in the Barnacle Alley neighborhood of Collinsport, just west of the Collins Cannery, after a youth of checkered shenanigans such as trespassing at Collinwood Mansion in 1940 and stowing away on a coaster freighter to Boston. Devlin settled down as a youthful entrepreneur collecting and reselling bottles found across Collinsport. Life changed for young Burke Devlin when attempting to reclaim the bottle that was apparently not quite empty. He found new employment as a figure model with the bottle's devoted and contemptuous owner, local artist Mr. Samuel Evans. These sketches brought him to the attention of Collins Cannery operations officer, the late confirmed bachelor, Mr. William Malloy. That's Bill Malloy for those who don't know. Who secured a fleet job for Mr. Devlin. Soon, Burke Devlin joined an elite social circle of young rebels, including the former self-proclaimed beatnik, Mr. Roger Collins, and his wife Laura in 1957. Mr. Devlin accidentally killed a pedestrian while driving Mr. Collins's automobile under the influence of intoxication. Spirits. Mr. Collins, a passenger, identified Devlin as the driver, and the ensuing trial resulted in both a 5-year prison sentence and colorful death threats issued by Devlin toward his former friend, Mr. Roger Collins. Upon his release from prison, Burke Devlin traveled the globe in search of rare antiques and risky business ventures. After amusing opportunities from Norway to Brazil, Devlin built his investments firm into a financial giant, with a spacious headquarters dominating the once delicate 86th floor of the Empire State Building. Not content with life in New York, a sentimental Devlin returned to Collinsport in the summer of 1966. Taking his business with him, he immediately rekindled relations with the Collins family. Finding amity with Mr. Roger Collins, a worthy business rival, in the reclusive Mrs. Paul Stoddard, an alleged romance with Mrs. Stoddard's daughter, Carolyn, as well as with another employee of the Collins family. At the time of his supposed death, Mr. Devlin was in the process of purchasing a Seaview house for eventually permanent residence in Collinsport after a planned wedding to his unnamed fiancée. The Collins family declined to comment. Services are pending the results of an official investigation. An informal celebration of Mr. Devlin's life is taking place this evening at the Blue Whale and Crowder House, 22 Cove Street. It's quiet and briar patch over the old house, and other than forgetting the forget- forgettable miniature of her former life, there doesn't seem to be a lot of privatization here. Yes, a lack of air conditioning, but it's Maine, you know. That while sorry, for male viewers, I'm not sure there are many back then, but it's clear that while Barnabas desperate methods are cruel, his motives are not. Jonathan Frid projected a familiar pain, melancholy, and unresolved desire better than any other actor in the medium. We have been there. I'm not going to say insult because of terrible baggage that perfectly decent decipher coined as a self-reference by a woman. I am led to believe immediately gave itself, but he didn't explicitly ask for this. If a grown man is sitting around watching Dark Shadows, I can tell you that either his dance card is empty, or he certainly knows that what an empty one looks like. And while no rational human would contemplate kidnapping or brainwashing, Barnabas is so darn earnest that we know his intentions are pure, motivated by a profound sense of loss. One so vast that it requires the tall order of the 1795 storyline to justify the ultimate comeuppance is when Barnabas loses her in the quest, concluding in the shattered realization that he has lost Josette forever. While supposedly taking the life of another innocent, his crime, the desire to not be alone. Yes, a philanthropic quest for power, but power over what was lost, power to undo a crime of jealousy. Angelique's specifically. If it sounds like I'm defending the undefendable, I am. But so is the show, because as the man transformed into its hero, we all kept watching. We all share his guilt. The reasons run deep. Episode 250. As Barnabas and Willie prepare a special gift for the wedding, while Maggie reappears at the altar. Will Maggie reappear at the altar? Barnabas, Jonathan Frid. The hypnosis on Maggie begins to wear off, and she plans her escape as Barnabas plans the wedding. Seeing the coffin he has had made for her, Maggie decides to kill Barnabas, but she is thwarted. Jonathan Frid knew exactly what he was doing. I'm convinced of that. Maybe, just maybe, the appeal he saw in the character was a surprise. In the first 4 or 5 episodes, by now the character has been around for nearly a month and a half. Ratings superstar, and despite his nervousness about lines and his reticence about being a sex symbol, it's kind of nice to have modicum of success at what you have been trying to do for 20 years. Frid himself would say that he was not exactly living the life of a renowned Shakespearean actor. So when you look at an episode like this, it's very clear to see he could have simply thwarted his mustache and leered at Maggie. Minically, there are faint glimmers of that, enough to please the more shallow members of the audience. But if you exclude just a few line readings at the ends of scenes and focus on how he interacts with Maggie, Barnabas shows optic optimism regarding his goals, finally achieving some kind of happiness. You're looking at a romantic lead in a romantic program. If there's anything that makes him unusual, it's watching a man pine away sentimentality on even the smallest details of a wedding. And yet, he doesn't lose his masculinity while doing so. This is endearing to watch, and I think it's a key, if not the key, as to why Barnabas is such an attractive character. For not just female viewers, I think that the actor knew that these choices were initially human, and they create reasons for a character to be kept around. It's an episode that ends with our fiancé brandishing a spike to attack you while you sleep, and it gives an actor the uneasy cue that writers can reduce the cast size at any moment. The elephant in the mausoleum comes down to whether or not Barnabas sees this as a kidnapping or a rescue mission. I think it's written as a kidnapping. I certainly know that Maggie feels that way about it. However, I believe that Barnabas cast himself as a deprogrammer somehow. This really is Josette. She truly has been ripped away into the 20th century. As he. Unlike Barnabas, however, she's been stuffed into a new body, mentally conditioned to think she's someone else. When looked upon this way, the episode changes tenure. I hate to admit that a coffin is a vaguely morbid wedding present, but I will concede that fact eventually. However, I believe that Josette was open to becoming a vampire once before, until Angelique's morbid sneak preview dissuaded her, with that distraction gone. This seems to be an idle time to try it again. And it just follows. If you're going to marry Barnabas, you're probably going to have to become a vampire. And if you're going to become a vampire, you're going to need a place to sleep. We were in that uncomfortable age between Petrus and the Bradys when it came to sitcom couples literally sleeping together. It's not like she can climb into the coffin, into his coffin. So yes, his and hers eternal rest. It's a proper way to round out an open casket wedding. 250 is easily one of the most painful and beautiful episodes in the series. If you tweak your expectations only about 2 degrees, it's about the lonely man, abused relentlessly over the one thing that so many take for granted: love. And he has one chance, one impossible chance, after an endless journey that began with the death of his fiancée, and then suicide of his mother, only to end in an age completely foreign to his own. To experience all of that, to keep an amazing monster of self in check, then to find the love of your life, to find the love of your past life waiting for you at journey's end. Given that, I think Barnabas shows the reserve of a saint. When people talk about courtliness and restraint, this is what they mean. We don't understand bloodlust, but we can understand the ultimate fantasy of winning back our Josettes wherever they are. Would you be as patient? Okay, guys, I'm going to wrap it up there. I'm not through with this part of the section yet, but here's where I am. I'm at 281, episode 281, page 45. I'm going to stop it there for tonight. That is part 3 for now. So I got to get to bed. But I'll be back tomorrow night with another read with part 4. Again, I said I was going to do these in parts. I love the Twilight Zone reference, obviously. I'm really enjoying this book. I think, and I'm sorry for the stumbles. I'm not the best reader, but I do enjoy this. It's very, I love the opinionative, informativeness. I've always felt that when Barnabas took Maggie, you could see Maggie in Josette. When I first saw Josette's portrait, I thought, that looks like Maggie. Especially the way her body came out, it looked like Maggie. So I didn't necessarily blame Barnabas. I always, I don't think it was a big deal. That whole coffin thing, though. Right. This book it's amazing so far. I'm going to leave a link in the description box. So far, I am enjoying this bad boy. If you guys heard, the Dark Shadows series is still being shopped around. I'm hoping for the best, guys. Cross your fingers, do whatever you got to do. I am hoping for the best. You guys have a great night, and thank you for joining me. I'll see you tomorrow night.